this groove, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Issei, Rias meets Sukuna. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of BoredMc on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Day 3 of walking to school. I have come to the realization that no one can ever pull the back in my day, we had to walk blah blah blah, CRP on me ever again. Oh, you has a 2-hour walk over a mountain to get to school, grandma? Well, I've walked over several for multiple days, and I don't even know how close I am. It's not like I have Google Maps or anything like that. Hell, I don't even have an actual map. I just have a vague, go that way, kind of direction. I don't mind though. I can always ask for directions, as I have been doing, and I'm having fun. One thing I have noticed though is that there are a lot more cursed spirits out here in the wild than back home. It's only been 3 days and I've killed dozens already. Well, my Shikigami have killed dozens. I only had to kill one myself because it was actually strong. I probably could have just let my Shikigami gang up on it, but I wanted to get some practice in before reaching school, so I beat it up myself. It didn't die in one hit like the others I've faced, but it was also pretty slow, so it didn't hurt me either. I've only encountered 2 settlements so far, mostly because I haven't been sticking to the roads but traveling in a straight line instead, but still. The first one was pretty welcoming, but the last seemed pretty suspicious of me. Apparently they didn't trust me because I looked like a sorcerer, according to some old guy who would actually hold a conversation with me. Purely out of curiosity, I then did confirm to them that I am a jujutsu sorcerer. I pretty much knew what to expect, so I wasn't surprised when they sort of subtly tried to get me to leave as quickly as possible. So, it turns out sorcerers aren't very popular everywhere. That's good to know. Still, I was pretty satisfied with the whole experience. I've never been treated so poorly before purely out of prejudice. It was an interesting experience. It probably didn't help their opinion of me that I was still smiling even when they kicked me out, but I was too happy to care. New experiences are what I'm looking for after all. And there have been so many. I've seen rice fields that go on for ages. I saw a field full of BLD red flowers, a tree so big that it would take 20 of me hand in hand to hug it. There was even this giant mountain that I was going to explore, but by the time I got halfway up, I got this really bad feeling that if I took another step to the peak then I would die. I'm not really afraid of that, but it didn't feel like the kind of thing I could talk my way out of, so I just resolved myself to go back when I'm stronger. I can be patient after all. If something is too dangerous to explore, then I just need to get more powerful first. If anything, I just felt challenged. The point is, I've been having fun. Which brings me to today. The sun is at its zenith, shining down on me through the leaves of the lush forest I tread. By my side is one of my Shikigami, gentle deer. It basically looks like one of the deer I grew up with, just that it's as tall as I am and the brown fur has darkened to black while the spots are more white and it has a weird symbol like an upside-down teardrop under its jaw. This is probably my favorite Shikigami. Both because of personal bias, and because its special ability is that its cursed energy is backwards. I don't know if there's a name for it, but I'm guessing it's something like blessed energy, since it seems to be an opposite to cursed energy. Either way, this version of energy actually heals, which is awesome, and though it took about a year, I did eventually manage to replicate the effect by myself. I basically just smash my cursed energy against itself and it makes blessed energy. I don't know how it works, probably some double negative stuff, but it does work, so I'm happy with that. The old man was pretty surprised by my blessed energy too, so it doesn't seem to be something all that commonly practiced. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever get tired of cursed energy. It's just so cool and interesting, not to mention just generally useful. It would be much more of a pain to walk through this untamed forest, for example, if not for the fact that I can literally just walk through it. Bushes and roots and the like aren't a problem when they're incapable of tripping me before they tear. Though, I did have to learn how to protect my clothes with cursed energy to avoid ending up naked all the time. It's kind of energy intensive though, so I try to only use it when the foliage has thorns and stuff that will rip my clothes. Pausing in my stride, I close one of my eyes and the next moment I am seeing the world through two perspectives. One is from my open eye and the other is through one of my divine dog's eyes. Near a decade of practice and experimentation with my innate technique has opened a lot of doors for me. My ability really does have a lot of potential, and I couldn't be happier about it. I'd take versatility over overwhelming power any day of the week. From my dog's eye, I can vaguely see what I have been walking towards. The dog is hidden behind the foliage, so the view isn't great, but I can still make out pretty clearly two forms in a recently made clearing, and by clearing, I mean an area of the forest that used to have trees and now has broken trees and cratered earth. You see, I started walking this way, despite it being in a different direction to my destination, because I felt a gathering of cursed spirits, each of which seemed to be about as strong as that one I struggled with. Naturally, I got curious. However, as I was on the way, all of the cursed spirits seemed to disappear from my senses, and then I felt even more cursed energy getting thrown around, likely by the battle that ruined this part of the forest, and I got even more curious. Now, cursed spirits fade away when killed. Which is why it's interesting that my dog is looking at a woman who seems to be resting, and what seems to be a cursed spirit's corpse a short distance from her. Curious and curiouser. Abruptly, a pale blue fire engulfs my vision and I flinch my eye open just as I feel my connection to my divine dog sputter out into the ether. Did she just kill my dog? What the F? If I wasn't who I am, I'd probably be a lot more mad about that. But it's just a shikigami, not a real dog, so I don't really care that much. Still, I desummon all my active shikigami just in case. Okay, I care a little bit, they're very fluffy. But I also have another dog, a bunch of rabbits and this cute deer among others. I keep walking as I try to decide if I'm mad or not. Come out. I know you're hiding. I hear the woman yell and realize that I'm actually pretty close now, closer than my dog was. I'm not hiding actually, I return as I step around a tree and quickly step back behind it to avoid another burst of fire. That was rude. Who are you? The woman demands as I step around the tree again, my arms raised in surrender and a smile on my face even as she glares at me. What are your intentions here? For a moment I don't answer, because this woman is just so appealing that I forgot to. Her hair is long and blonde, which stands out in this nation, though not as much as I feel like it should. She has hazel eyes, small eyebrows and a face so appealing that no amount of description could do it justice with a body to match. DMN, she's appealing. DMN, you're appealing, CRP. I said that out loud. Coughing into a fist, I pretend that never happened and continue. What I mean to say is that I was merely coming to deal with a gathering of cursed spirits that I felt. Though, it seems as though you have done so for me. The woman blushes slightly at my misspeak, but quickly gets back to glaring at me with one hand alight in blue flame that feels weird to my senses held out threateningly. Do you expect me to believe that? She accuses, sounding awfully scornful. I would hope so, but ultimately the choice is yours. On another subject, how come that cursed spirit hasn't disappeared yet? Is it still alive somehow? Also, who even are you? My name's Narako, nice to meet you. Don't change the subject, sorcerer. If you have no ill intentions, then why were you watching me and why have you been suppressing your cursed energy? My head tilts as I look at her in confusion before a light bulb goes off in my head and I realize the misunderstanding taking place. Ah. That. No, don't worry, I am not suppressing my cursed energy, it's just like that. She seems dubious. I feel like I failed a charisma check. I don't believe you. DMN. Wait, this is an easy fix. Alright, if I start actually trying to suppress my cursed energy now, will you believe me then? She raises a brow and makes a go-on gesture, so I shrug and focus on sucking all my cursed energy away and into my gut. Really, I should have seen it coming, but the moment that I opened my eyes, I barely got to see a blur of gold before I felt a heavy impact in my gut and then another on my back as I was slammed into the ground with a clawed hand squeezing my throat. Right. Concealing my energy that much also takes away my active reinforcement. Oops. Who are you? The woman demands once my head stopped spinning, and I try to answer, but just end up wheezing. The woman takes, in my opinion, too long to realize I can't be choked and answer questions at the same time, before loosening her hold on me. I start, only to cough. My name is Narako, nice to meet you. Could you please try and avoid tearing my scarf? It was a gift from a little brat and I think she will cry if it breaks. The woman above me glares even harder at me, and I match her stare with a light smile of my own, looking her straight in the eye. She really is appealing. You're not lying. She states, more than asks, though she does seem rather confused as she does. Probably because she seems to think I have something against her, but I haven't tried fighting back and don't intend to unless she's really going to kill me. I try to avoid lying if possible. It's not something I like to do. Why did you reveal yourself to me? She asks, and I get the feeling she's got some kind of lie detector thing going on right now since she's repeating questions. I was curious and wanted to see if you were up for a conversation. That's all. She asks, seemingly struggling to believe me at all. I've been told curiosity is my curse. She seems to take my answer with more weight than I intended, and after staring into my eyes a bit longer, her expression softens from a glare into that expression people make when they're kind of embarrassed about being wrong but don't want to admit it. It's kind of cute on her. Oh. Her hand leaves my throat and she jumps to her feet, walking back to the rock she was resting on, though I notice she doesn't let me out of her peripheral vision. Sitting up myself, I rub at my slightly sore throat for a moment as I return my cursed energy to its usual flow and feel the light pain fade away. Standing up, I pat myself down and check my scarf for any scratches and happily find none, then I walk after her into the clearing. The corpse on the floor is some weird kind of bird monster. Kind of like a harpy, but with a really long nose. I kind of recognize it, but I can't quite remember what they were called. Something beginning with a T. He's not a cursed spirit, the woman says, clearly having seen me eyeballing the thing. He's a yokai. A tengu, to be specific. Turning back to her, I grin at the new source of information, even if she seems slightly bashful. Probably about the whole threatening me thing, but I was over that before it was even over. Still. Yokai. The old man mentioned them as basically being cursed spirits with physical bodies, but he also admitted that he didn't know much about the subject. But here is a yokai corpse. I kind of want to cut it open and see what its biology is like, but I'm not sure if this lady would appreciate that. I would like to apologize, the woman says, each word coming out slowly and with great difficulty. However, I was just in battle, so I feel it is perfectly reasonably that I mistrusted you, especially as you were spying on me with a shikigami. Not the best apology but not the worst. Oh yeah, you just reminded me. I want compensation. What? She levels a flat look at me, and I just move my hands back to rest in their sleeves. That was a special shikigami. Now that you've killed it, it's gone forever. Oh. She says again, looking a mix between regretful and annoyed. She really doesn't like being in the wrong, does she? I suppose I can understand. I'm quite prideful myself after all, even if my pride is a lot more difficult to wound. As compensation, please teach me everything you know about yokai. I am not above using guilt to gain knowledge. Why? She demands, looking suspicious once again. Remember that thing I said about me being curious? Shouldn't you be more focused on cursed spirits, sorcerer? I'm not technically even a sorcerer yet, since I'm actually on my way to the school up in Edo right now, and I'm only attending out of curiosity in the first place. I don't intend on spending my whole life focused on nothing but cursed spirits. We hold each other's eyes for a moment before eventually she concedes and lets out a sigh. Fine. As compensation for destroying your Shikigami, I will come with you and teach you about yokai until we near the city of Edo. Deal? Deal. I accept before moving a piece of broken tree over and sitting down in front of her. Well, where do you want to start? Bad question, lady, I have so many places I want to start. What's with that Tengu? Why were there so many cursed spirits here? Why did you kill them? What separates yokai from humans and cursed spirits? Your cursed energy felt weird, is it different? How do yokai interact with sorcerers? How come you're fine with sticking with me all the way to Edo? What was that Tengu even doing here? What's your name anyway? What's a yokai's lifespan? Are yokai inherently negative like curses? Okay. Okay. She abruptly yells, interrupting me. Let me answer before asking your next question. Grinning unrepentantly at her, I wait for her to calm down. Clearing her throat and shooting me another glare, she straightens in a way that reminds me of when Kinoshita would lecture me. First of all, Edo is only about 1 day's walk from here, so it is not far. She gives me a deadpan look when I blink in surprise at that information. You're going to Edo and you don't even know where it is. I've been asking for directions. I know it's that way, I say as I point the direction I was walking. It's not that way, she responds, still deadpan. Well, I'm sure there is someone in that direction who would have known the way. You're kind of an idiot, aren't you? I prefer the term carefree. She sighs again and decides to just move on. Yokai are not cursed spirits, but they are not human either. You could think of them as somewhere in the middle. They have a physical body, instead of cursed spirits who are beings of negative energy. Like cursed spirits, yokai can be born from negative energy, but that is incredibly rare, and those born that way tend to be incredibly powerful and then become ancestors to great lines of yokai, such as Tengu. Yokai are not inherently negative like curses, but they can become incredibly powerful through negative energy, though most yokai just live peacefully in isolation. Huh. That's interesting. Does that mean I could find a yokai village? Are there yokai villages? I ask. Don't interrupt me, she immediately returns. Yes, there are yokai villages. They have a civilization, just like every other sapient species. As for your other questions, this Tengu has been terrorizing a nearby village. He gathered up some cursed spirits and would send them to attack the village, then disguise himself as a human sorcerer to fight them off. Doesn't sound so bad, just a bit of an attention seeker. He would then use the fact that he saved them to demand that the people of the village do as he said, from bedding the woman to eating them if he felt like it. Sometimes he would just skip the process altogether and fly in and steal away whatever or whoever he wanted. Well, never mind. Then. I'm sure the villagers will be happy to know he's dead then, I comment. You don't seem that upset. No compassion for your fellow man? The woman asks, her tone mocking. I'm not sure if she's trying to get a rise out of me of if this is just how she is as a person, but I just shrug and smile. I'm not happy they have suffered, but it happens. People live, people die. People suffer, people thrive. Nature moves on, time goes on. I do feel compassion, and I don't want to see people suffer, but focusing all your attention on the suffering of the world will make you blind to all of its joys. It's best to just think about what you can do to make things better and move on, than to just wallow in grief. I don't look back to see her expression as I approach the Tengu and crouch down next to it. Are you some kind of monk? She asks, making me chuckle. No, but I was raised in a shrine. Did you have any plans for doing anything with this corpse, or can I take it to that village you mentioned? I'm sure it would bring them some closure. Why bother? I was just going to burn it. Because they will be grateful. So. Why care what they think? They aren't sorcerers like you. Just a bunch of monkeys, they can figure it out themselves. Why did you kill this Tengu? I ask, and she goes silent. Shrugging, I make the sign to summon my remaining divine dog, only to pause as I feel something strange in my connection to my technique that causes me to freeze. My divine dog. It's bigger. Focusing closer, I realize what's happened. The dog that died, its power seems to have flowed down into the other dog, making it even bigger and stronger. So cool. Making a different sign, I decide to leave the upgraded dog alone for now. Gentle dear, I intone and my shadow stretches out, allowing my Shikigami to burst free. Grabbing the Tengu by its burnt, leathery skin, I haul it up and over my deer before turning back to the woman whose name I still don't have. I just realized that I never did get your name, I say as she looks at my deer like she's never seen one before. Also, which way is it to the village? Shaking her head, she points an arm to the side. That way, she says, and I start moving in that direction. They won't show you any gratitude, you know. She asks, making me pause and turn back to her with a raised brow. It doesn't matter if you tell them you killed him yourself. Just the fact that you're not a monkey like them will make them hate you. If you don't scare them into SBMSN, they will come after you with torches. Maybe, I acquiesce, thinking back on that village that threw me out. I still think they will be grateful though. You're wrong. Humans aren't like that. They will hate you just because you are different. They won't thank you. Good thing I'm not looking for thanks then, isn't it? You're a fool, but maybe this will be good for you. A wake-up call to the true nature of those monkeys. Her scornful tone tells one hell of a story, but I'm not socially obtuse enough to call her out on it. Instead, I just chuckle and give her a wink before continuing my walk. Humans are more complex than that, you know. You should give them more credit. I make it a few steps before noticing that she isn't moving to follow me at all, which isn't unexpected considering her earlier words. However, even if she doesn't follow me, she does still call out. Tamamo. My name is Tamamo no Me. Smiling, I wave over my shoulder. Nice to meet you, Tamamo-sensei. It doesn't take long before the village is in sight. It's bigger than the one near my home by quite a bit. About 6 times as big, with over 24 houses that I can see, and they're actually arranged near each other on a proper road. From what I know, most villages in this time PRD are more just a few hamlets roughly near each other. Before I actually leave the forest proper, I make another shadowgraphic hand sign, this one in the shape of a fox. Trickster fox, I intone, and from my shadow emerges a small white fox, about the size of my forearm, maybe a little bit bigger, with sleek, smooth white fur and glowing blue eyes that somehow just seem mischievous. It also has a symbol between its ears of a triangle similar to the ones on my dog's, or dog now, except it's on top of another symbol that kind of looks like one of those stands I remember using to hold stuff over Bunsen burners in high school. When I first started training my technique, I struggled to even summon more than one Shikigami at the same time, and even now, I struggle to get 4 out at the same time. Still, Trickster Fox's ability is the ability to project illusions. They're not physical illusions, and I have to make an illusion of a shadow when I use it because it doesn't block out light either, which kind of doesn't make any sense from a physics standpoint. How can you see something if light passes straight through it? Is it weird of me that this is the thing I find the most unexplainable in this new life? Probably. Whatever the case, my fox climbs up my clothes and crawls into my scarf, hiding itself wrapped around my neck. It's very warm. Then I have the fox project an illusion over my deer of itself. This way, the people of the village, monkeys, as Tamamo called them, will actually be able to see the deer, instead of just seeing a floating tengu. A short walk later, and I am approaching the village proper. I noticed some people spot me earlier, so there's already something of a crowd gathered to greet me, with even more people hiding around in the buildings and alleys watching. Walking up to the group of not so subtly armed men, I give the one front and center my best smile. Hello there. I have heard that you have been suffering attacks by this here tengu. Rest assured, as you can clearly see, I gesture to my side before returning my hand back to rest before me, it has been slain. You needn't live in fear any longer. Nobody responds for a moment, and then a whole lot of muttering breaks out. So much that I can't catch any words, but the tone doesn't seem particularly happy. The guy I assume is the local leader steps forward and glares at me, holding some sharp farming equipment in a white-knuckled grip. What have you done? He yells at me. Now who will protect us from the spirits? I make sure to keep my peaceful smile, even as the crowd starts to get agitated. I can actually feel the cursed energy in their bodies spiking as negative emotions flood the crowd. The cursed spirits are also dead. So much so that I cannot even bring you corpses. Lies. Someone in the crowd yells out. It's just another trick. Look at that deer. That's no normal animal. We have nothing left to give. Having my deer step closer to me, I grab the tengu's corpse and throw it to the ground before the crowd before canceling my technique and letting the deer dissolve into shadows. This is not a trick, and I do not want anything that you have. You are safe now. That bird said the same thing. Then it took my wife. This is just another demon. We're done being cattle. Looking through the crowd, feeling their negativity, I don't hate them. They're just people in the end. And they've suffered the worst poison of them all. Hope. First the monsters came, and they felt despair. Then came a man who said he would save them, and they felt hope. Then this man demanded food and drink and women, and they felt that hope shatter. In the time since then, they have just been getting hammered down, again and again by this tengu. So much so that they gave up on fighting back. So much so, that hope now tastes to them like a bitter poison. They want to accept it. To believe me. To be free from despair. They just can't bring themselves to. They're too close to the edge, too hopped up on emotions to be able to think rationally. Too human to accept reality. That's fine. I didn't expect them to. Putting my hands back in my sleeves, I start walking. Edo is on the other side of the village after all, so I do need to go that way. Your demons are dead, I say, even as they all back away from my approach, keeping a distance with their bodies but not with their words as they curse at me. You may rest easy, knowing that your suffering has been avenged. A rock bounces across the ground in front of me, and then another bounces off my hip. I ignore it and keep walking. Monster. They yell as another stone hits me as I continue to walk, not changing pace or expression. Liar. They scream as some rotten fruit splatters against my shoulder, getting some gross juice on my cheek. Sorcerer. They accuse, as a sharp rock smashes into my forehead, leaving a faint mark but nothing more. I don't react to any of it, I feel no need to. Physically, they cannot hurt me, and words definitely can't hurt me. I'm going to have to clean my clothes, but that's something I do anyway, so it's no bother. Nothing they could possibly do to me would have any kind of lasting effect. More than that, I understand. They are angry. They don't hate me. They are just angry at the idea I represent. All in all, this whole interaction, this whole day. To me, it is just another day. I learned some new things, which I always enjoy. Had some new experiences, which I love. But ultimately, none of this could have happened, and my life would not be any different for it. To me, today has hardly been significant. To them, their entire lives have just turned on their axis. Everything has changed. It is so much more significant for them, so I just ignore the rocks and the fruit. Because it means so much more for them to throw it than it does for me to clean it off later. Eventually, however, I do leave the village behind and walk back into the forests, headed for Edo. Humans are so interesting to me. I told you they wouldn't thank you, a voice calls out ahead of me, and I turn my smile up to Tamamo, sitting on a tree branch. Tamamo-san. I wasn't sure if I would see you again. I am not one to flake on a deal made, and drop the san. Tamamo hops down from the tree and starts walking alongside me, giving me a strange look that has me raising a brow. Reaching a hand up, she uses her thumb to wipe the bit of juice off my cheek. There's a lake this way, she says instead of whatever is actually on her mind, and I nod gratefully. The walk to water is done in peaceful silence. Well, peaceful for me. She seems rather frustrated for whatever reason. When we arrive, the first thing I do is take off my scarf and look it over. It's not that bad, luckily. The fact that it's poor quality actually did it some favors, since it's actually sturdy, instead of better-looking silks are. It doesn't take long to scrub it clean, and I hang it on a branch to dry before taking off the outer layer of my kimono and doing the same. I don't bother with the hakama pants, because they're just going to get dirty again walking through weeds. Why did you let them do that? Tamamo eventually asks once I've hung up my clothes to dry and pulled a spare set out of my shadow, sounding like she's really trying and failing to understand. You sure make me repeat myself a lot, I tease with a smile, continuing before she can be offended. They needed closure. They needed to see that the Tengu was dead. They threw rocks at Yunarako. Rocks and rotten food. I was right. They weren't grateful at all. They cursed you and spat on your kindness. At this point, she is pinning me under a glare like she's accusing me of a crime or something. You don't seem that strong, but you're better than those monkeys. You could have slaughtered them all. Why would you let them treat you like that? Sighing, I take a seat on the grass next to the lake as I think about how to word this. Most humans don't really stop being children. They struggle with maturity. Perspective. In the end, they are an emotional people, and those people down there. They are the downtrodden. They have been suffering for so long, with no possible outlet for their pain. It's not good to bottle up your emotions, you know. It's bad for your health, and that goes for me and you too, for everyone and everything capable of feeling. If you bottle your emotions up too much, eventually you will start to crack. That's why you should smile when you're happy and cry when you're sad. Pausing as I look at my reflection in the water, I consider what I'm saying before continuing. Those people have been bottling up their emotions for so long that they started to crack. That kind of wound isn't something that can be easily healed. Time will eventually dull the pain, but the scars will likely be with them for the rest of their life. However, even if there isn't really a treatment for that pain, the worst thing you can do is keep bottling it up. They needed a release. They needed to vent those feelings, or the cracks would just keep growing larger and larger. Finding myself smiling, I turn back to Tamamo, feeling like I'm better understanding my own feelings by saying this all out loud. Emotions are not some simple thing. When I say they needed to vent their negative emotions, that doesn't mean they can just scream at the sky and feel better. For something like that, they need a target to throw all of their hatred, all their grief and their frustrations upon. They don't hate me, they were just so full of hate that they took it out on the first available target. Tamamo is starting to look at me like I'm an alien with two heads. But why would you let them? You only showed them kindness, what right do they have to choose you as the target of their hate? How could you accept such an injustice? Because it is a good thing for them, I answer honestly. It is progress. If they truly thought that they were still in the same bad spot they were in yesterday, then they never would have had the courage to curse me. That they could even do that much, shows that they feel safer already. And I don't mind if they return my kindness with malice. I don't show kindness with the expectation of receiving gifts in return in the first place. I just do what I want to do. Besides, better they target me than someone who will punish them for their feelings. You are a strange man, Narako, and an even stranger sorcerer. Aren't your kind supposed to be selfish? I would say I am pretty selfish. I selfishly love the world, no matter how it treats those that walk upon it. I glance at the scarf drying nearby. I selfishly pursue my desires, no matter who I leave behind. You are the strangest sorcerer I have ever met, Tamamo says, eyeing me like I'm something completely foreign to her before she continues in a softer tone, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Thank you. I grin at her. I still don't see the point. Give it a year, I tell her. Give it a year and then come back here. By then, their frustrations will have faded. By then, they will have accepted that they are no longer in danger of curses. They will have had time to feel safe again, to feel free again. The wound will never fully heal, but if you come back in 1 year, you will see the difference for yourself, and by the time the next generation rolls around, the wound will fade into time. Tamamo shakes her head, but I can tell that she's not as confident as she was before. I still think it was pointless, she says, and I just shrug. You are entitled to your own thoughts. You don't have to agree with me to understand my motivations. And you are okay with me finding your motivations to be foolish? We've only just met. It would be strange if you started accepting my own opinions over ones you have held for however long before we met. You really are strange, Tamamo mutters, making me chuckle. Seeing as we're going to wait for my clothes to dry, I make a shadow graphic of a rabbit and summon my most populous Shikigami. Rabbit escape, I intone and the clearing is flooded with tons of fully ball of white fur. Letting myself fall backwards, I close my eyes and let out a contented sigh as I am caught by and enveloped in a pile of fluff. Using magic superpowers for mundane lifestyle stuff is the best, and having an on-demand super fluffy army of bunnies ready to act as a beanbag is amazing. Cracking an eye open, I meet the deadpan stare of Tamamo's with a grin. Do you want a cushion, Tamamo? She doesn't answer, so I make her one anyway and ignore the way she glares at me when I snicker at her obvious comfort. So, I say after a moment of comfortably enjoying the piece. Do you know much about current events? My information is a few decades out of date. A few decades? She asks. How old are you? That makes me laugh. I'm only 15, I say with a chuckle. My teacher is old though. I only left home for the first time a few days ago, so everything's pretty new to me. Human politics aren't something I'm interested in, Tamamo answers, and I choose to ignore how she keeps separating herself from humanity. I only know the broad strokes. Smiling, I give her my undivided attention. Teach me. Another appealing day has me and my new traveling companion, Tamamo, walking through yet another forest of lush greenery under the bright sun. The peace is somewhat disturbed by the sound of the ground shaking and trees being crushed as one of my Shikigami, Lion's Pride, tears through a few weak cursed spirits. Lion's Pride is probably my strongest Shikigami, at least, before my first two combined into Divine Dog, Totality. That one's probably my strongest, but I felt like hiding it from Tamamo, so I haven't brought it out. Lion's Pride is a massive lion, its shoulders reaching above my head and its width tripling my own and then some. Its fur is a lush golden hue that shines like the sun, and correspondingly, its ability is that it gets stronger under daylight, with its peak strength being when the sun is at its own peak. Since it's only early in the morning, the Shikigami is not too strong right now. Various unique Shikigami and the ability to store things in your own shadow. What even is your innate technique? Tilting my head to Tamamo, I notice her giving my Shikigami a strange look as it finishes off the last few cursed spirits. It's called the 10 Shadows technique. What about you? What's your technique? I don't have one, she breezily answers as we continue walking. What about that blue fire you used? I ask as I begin petting my Shikigami's side once it joins us. Tamamo has been hogging the attention of my fox Shikigami since she saw it. It's been sitting on her shoulder since we got up this morning after a brief camp. That wasn't an innate technique, and on the subject of innate techniques, firstly, you shouldn't answer that question. Innate techniques are kept private for a reason and people consider it rude to ask about it. Yokai, however, don't have innate techniques like sorcerers do as a rule. If it's rude, then why did you ask? I dryly answer, getting only a mischievous smirk in response. Sighing, I don't press the non-issue since I don't really care. Can I learn how to use that fire then? And why don't yokai have innate techniques? No. You can't, she answers my first question, much to my visible disappointment. Yokai don't have innate techniques because innate techniques are purely a product of cursed energy, and thus only appear in humans and powerful cursed spirits. Yokai have osor instead. Speaking of cursed spirits, I sense another one nearby and send Lion's Pride to go kill it. There really are a lot of them all over the place, and there's only been more and more the closer I've gotten to civilization from my little slice of nowhere, which does kind of make sense. They are born from human emotions after all, it's only natural there would be more when there are more humans around. I thought yokai were full of cursed energy. There is a distinction, she pauses to think of how to phrase it. Cursed energy is purely spiritual. It is the energy behind negative emotions. Yokai don't have cursed energy, because they are not purely spiritual beings like cursed spirits, and they are not neutral beings like humans. To yokai, cursed energy isn't just the result of negative emotions, it is tied to their very being. So instead of cursed energy, they have yuki. Yuki. Tamamo sighs, understandably. I asked a lot of questions before we even made camp, and have been doing nothing but asking anything that comes to mind since we woke up. Think of it like natural ki corrupted by cursed energy. Ki. I ask with a smile while she groans when she realizes she's just further ignited my curiosity. Life force. Can you manipulate ki? Not by itself, she answers, and I'm glad she's still humoring me. You need to use either negative or positive energy to do so. Negative is easier, you do that already. There's also tuki, but that is both more complicated and a lot simpler. I've really got to give her some credit. Not only is Tamamo incredibly knowledgeable, but even more than that, she is being so generous. At the start, she seemed pretty entertained answering my questions, probably finding amusement in my curiosity. But after so many hours, she's clearly starting to get annoyed by it. But even then, she isn't withholding information or shortening her explanations even knowing it will only lead to more questions being asked. It's respectable. So, when I'm reinforcing my body with cursed energy, I'm using my ki. Yes, though it is more accurate to say you're using your ki as a base and then multiplying it with your cursed energy. You know what multiplying is, right? Yes, I know my numbers, I answer with a chuckle, not at all offended. This is the past after all, most people don't know how to read let alone count. So what's different with tuki? The trees around us clear away somewhat as we reach the peak of a hill, and far off on the horizon, over more forests and hills, I can finally see Edo starting to come into view. We're almost there. Tuki isn't pulled by positive or negative emotions. Kind of. It's complicated because it is difficult to explain, but it is simple because it is easy to use. How so? Give me a moment to think how to explain it, Tamamo snaps, making me laugh. Tuki is ki that gets enhanced by fighting spirit. The reason it is so difficult to explain, is because fighting spirit isn't clearly defined. No one really knows exactly what it is, so it has been simplified into fighting spirit. Basically, if you train your body really strong for a long time and stubbornly want to fight with your whole soul, then you can manifest tuki. I wouldn't recommend bothering with it though. Why not? it couldn't hurt to have more sources of strength. Because mastering Tuki requires a great deal of dedication. You would have to push your studies and training in cursed energy aside to focus on it, which is pointless anyway since you can achieve the same effect with cursed reinforcement. Tuki is only really practiced by stubborn fools who have no other path to growing stronger. Humming, I don't agree or disagree with her words. I already trained my body plenty, and I still want to experience it, so I'll probably try and unlock Tuki at some point. That said, it doesn't seem a priority when apparently all it is good for is reinforcement. We walk in peaceful silence as I ponder over the new information, but after a while I eventually speak up again. You mentioned Osor. What is that? As an answer, Tamamo turns her head enough that she can meet my eye, and when she does, I feel a shiver go down my spine that I haven't felt since that first curse I met. It's fear, I realize that I am feeling, and I can feel my grin widen at the strange sensation. Then, with a blink, the feeling disappears as if a gust of wind. That is Osor. It is the fear that makes a yokai manifested, Tamamo says, and I think she's forgotten that she's been trying to hide the fact that she's a yokai. Not that I'm going to point that out to her, of course. Instead, I just ask more questions. You mentioned that ki is neutral and can be brought out by negative energy or by fighting spirit, but you haven't said anything about positive energy. How does that work? Who uses positive energy if yokai and humans both use negative? Kami, is her immediate answer. Kami are the equal and opposite of cursed spirits and so their energy is positive, like that dear Shikigami of yours. Though, don't mistake the average Kami with a Kami in the heavens. Those Kami are divine and naturally work by different rules. That makes sense actually. Kami are everywhere in everything, and they're pretty much always kind and helpful. This is why we show them respect and kindness in turn through rituals and prayer. Also, good to know that that is called positive energy, not blessed energy as I've been calling it. And, now that I think about it, it makes a lot more sense how I can manifest it by smashing my cursed energy against itself. Two negatives make a positive after all. How do the divine work? I ask, and for the first time since I've known her, Tamamo doesn't have an answer. I don't know. She must have seen the surprised look on my face because she sends me a glare. The divine live in the heavens above us as celestial beings, to know the divine is to be divine. So unless you happen to meet an Okami, no one is going to answer that for you. Sighing, I accept her answer and keep walking. The silence is longer this time as I actually struggle to think of questions to ask, my mind too occupied absorbing the wealth of information already given. Not to mention some excitement at finally reaching the big city. Soon enough, I'll be in the ancient Japanese spirit equivalent of Hogwarts and I'll get to meet all sorts of interesting people. Hopefully. I'm not in a hurry though, so we keep our pace light. By my estimate, we should reach Edo by evening. However, once we clear the forest and with Edo still only on the horizon, Tamamo comes to a stop, not stepping out into the sun. Tamamo? I ask, turning back to her to see that she's adopted a purposefully aloof expression. Our deal was merely that I travel with you until we reach near Edo. We have done so. This is where we part ways. Oh. Right. I forgot about that part. It's a shame, but I have a feeling we will meet again, so at least it's not goodbye. Wait, I call out before she can walk off. Before you go, may I ask a favor? One last lesson. She stares at me for a long moment, her clothes blowing in a breeze that idly makes me realize that at some point I'd stopped considering jeans as normal clothes and kimono as traditional clothes. Now, when I see Tamamo's dress I just think of it as clothes. That's pretty weird to think about. Just another aspect of living in the past really. What once was traditional and strange to see is now just everyone's everyday wear. Though, Tamamo's clothes are definitely of a better quality than my own. Fine. One more lesson, she agrees, and I send her a mischievous grin full of eagerness. Fight me. Her head tilts and her lip twitches into a brief frown. Why? She asks, almost accusing but not quite. I'm sure there's some subtext going on here that I'm completely blind to, but since I don't know what it is, I just ignore it. Because being a jujutsu sorcerer is all about fighting cursed spirits, but I've never really been in a fight before, and I don't want to embarrass myself too much when I get there with my inexperience. Tamamo raises a brow with a deadpan expression on her face. I've seen you kill a number of cursed spirits in the short time we've been together. I don't really count them as fights, I respond with a shrug. Why is that? She asks, and I feel my smile become slightly more solemn without my control as I give her the honest answer. Because I've yet to exert myself. Other than that time with the first cursed spirit I ever saw, I have never once in this life truly had to push myself. Sure, I push my body in training, but that's not really the same. I've yet to have to truly try. It's unsatisfying. Tamamonome. As Narako gives his answer, she notices the far-off look that briefly crosses his eyes, and she understands. He has never faced an equal in battle before. She understands that feeling well. She is a genius. She has been praised as such her entire life by her village. Like all kitsune, she was born with a single tail. Normally, as a kitsune grows older, they will gain a tail every 100 years, except for the final tail which takes 200. Every 100 years, when a kitsune's next tail grows in, their power grows to match. That is just how it works. Their strength is directly tied to the number of tails they have. However, Tamamonome is only 78, by all accounts, she should only have one tail. She has 3. Because unlike every other kitsune known, it is Tamamo's age that needs to catch up to her power, not the other way around. Instead of gaining tails and then power, she has done the opposite. Because she is a genius. Her village expect her to be the first 9-tailed kitsune in 1,000 years. There has only been one before, and they died so long ago that no one is really sure they existed in the first place. Most kitsune don't even make it to their 7th tail before their potential runs out. Then they can't gain any more tails no matter how long they live. So she understood the look in his eye perfectly. The look of someone yet to meet an equal. Still. She's pretty sure he's not nearly as strong as she is. He's just too sheltered to have met anyone powerful yet. He's also only human. Even if he isn't as lowly as those monkeys, there is still a distance that separates them from BRTH. Though, that lion Shikigami of his is pretty dangerous, and the deer could be annoying with its positive energy. Are you sure? She still asks, because it's a risky thing he is asking of her. Of course, he responds, as she knew he would. Very well then. Just don't curse me when you lose. Narako laughs at her answer, which doesn't surprise her. She would be surprised if he was even capable of cursing anyone out of something as petty as vengeance. He's the kind of man who would die complimenting the one who killed him. Truly, he is the strangest sorcerer she has ever met. As if to prove her point, Narako continues, would you like to change into one of my spare sets of clothes first? Your kimono is very pretty and looks well made, I'd feel bad if I damaged it. Truly, truly strange. I thank you for the consideration, but you needn't worry. She doesn't explain that she can clean and repair her clothing, or even just create a new set altogether, and being the considerate man that he is, he doesn't ask why he needn't worry and merely accepts her words at face value. He's very lucky she felt intrigued enough by him that she humored his deal in the first place. Had she not felt the strange warmth of his cursed energy and become intrigued, it would have been incredibly easy to trick him with lies when he seems to believe everything she says. Suit yourself, Narako responds as he takes off his scarf that he seems to care a lot about considering its poor quality and drops it into his shadow. Following that, he stretches his arms out and cracks his neck, raising an eyebrow in her direction when he notices she isn't doing the same. Then he holds 2 fingers out in a familiar, annoying gesture and calls out, curtain. Immediately, ink paints the sky and falls around them in a large radius, forming a dome-shaped barrier, and Tamamo has to put some effort in keeping her kitsune featured hidden as the barrier's effect kicks in. Cursed spirits within a curtain are unable to hide, for the most part, and while yokai aren't cursed spirits, as she has been telling him, the curtain still makes it more difficult to hold their human disguises. Still, she wouldn't be a genius if something as simple as that could trip her up. A curtain with no incantation. Impressive, she comments, getting a confused blink in response. She's noticed that when he gets confused he tends to blink and tilt his head slightly. She does her best to ignore how endearing she finds it. Is it? He asks. It means you are above average, at least. She answers. Ah, it's probably just that curtain is the only barrier technique that my father taught me, so I've practiced it a lot. She almost rolls her eyes at his modesty. She imagines the faces that those sorcerers in Edo will make when he gets there will be incredibly amusing. It's a shame she won't be able to see it. Most sorcerers are grade 3. The above average ones are grade 2, and most of those still use the incantation when making a curtain. They're also all quite a few years older than he is. Shaking his head, Tamamo enters a combat stance and throws away useless thoughts, focusing on her body and her yuki as she puts herself in the mindset of battle. Narako mimics, though his stance is obviously unrefined. Just looking at him she can tell that he has some proper education but has never actually applied what he's been taught. Oh, by the way, Narako says, a friendly, if sheepish smile on his face. I'm going to try to kill you. I would appreciate it if you do the same. There's the sorcerer in him. Saying that with a smile she can tell is genuinely friendly. Still, she tilts her head at that, confused until realization sets in. You really are sheltered, aren't you? She asks, amused despite herself as he blinks in response, so she continues before he can ask, her voice strong. There is no point in a fight if you are going to pull your punches. In fact, it's greatly insulting to fight with the intention of sparing your opponent. Hear this well, Narako. You must always fight to kill, there is no alternative. Teaching students could technically be called an alternative, but that's not really fighting, it's teaching, so she doesn't count it. Oh, I didn't realize, he says, his grin only growing wider, and for the first time, she properly recognizes him as a sorcerer. Let's fight with our lives on the line then. As it should be, she returns. Standing opposite each other, the tension between them rises slowly, and being the more experienced of the two, Tamamo decides to engage first. Truthfully, she wouldn't have accepted the fight if not for his dear Shikigami. With that, he should survive. Probably. Dashing forward, a gust follows in her wake as Tamamo blurs in front of Narako and thrusts a clawed hand at his chst, intending to tear a hole into his torso to end the fight in the first move. But, unexpectedly, Narako was fast enough to respond to her movement and leaned back until his hand touched the floor behind him, giving him enough leverage to kick up at her. She blocks the blow with a reinforced arm, intending to counter only to be launched a few paces back from the blow, her arm stinging slightly. That was a strong blow. Before she can question it any further, Narako appears in front of her with a fist raised in a telegraphed punch that she easily counters, even distracted, with a palm move to his chst that returns the favor of sending him back. He is stronger and faster than she expected. More durable too. He has such a weak presence that she underestimated him even after traveling together. That is her mistake. She won't do it again. Pushing her yuki harder, Tamamo dashes back into the fight as fast as she can, making Narako's eyes widen at her speed, and yet, he still manages to block her claw. BLD splatters as she tears a chunk out of his forearm instead of his throat, and she feels a rib crack when his retaliatory kick strikes home. Ow! Narako whines as he cradles his arm and generates his own positive energy, somehow, to heal himself. The battlefield isn't a place for endless speculation, so she just assumes that he is somehow channeling that dear Shikigami's ability without summoning it and moves on. Similar to cursed spirits, however, positive energy is poison to yokai and the opposite heals, so she only needs to pour some yuki into her cracked rib to fix it. There's a brief lull as they circle each other, reassessing. Yet, despite the injuries, she finds that they are both smiling. This time, both of them dash each other at the same time and meet in the middle. Narako goes for a punch to her face that she ducks under, grabbing his wrist with one of her own and pulling him off balance and into her waiting elbow. He takes the hit straight to the jaw and his head snaps back, but before she can continue to pummel him he surprises her by swnging his head back forward and viciously headbutting her. Luckily, they are about the same height so he doesn't break her nose, but it does disorient her enough that she loses her grip of his wrist and has to defend as his other fist swings at her. But in the end, she is the more experienced fighter of the two of them and she has his measure now, so she manages to defend herself, and in the flurry of combat that follows, she finds herself scoring more and more hits while only occasionally receiving one of his. Yet, as the fight continues, she starts hitting him less and less, and the fight gets more and more even. It takes her a moment to truly understand why the fight is shifting in his favor, but when she does she can't help but feel incredulous. He's learning. He's getting better, that fact is undeniable, and when she nearly loses her throat in an incredibly familiar maneuver, she realizes that he's not just getting better, he's copying her. He's devouring her martial arts with every hit he takes. I apologize, she thinks to him as her own grin actually grows to match his own. It seems I was still underestimating you. Ducking under his next punch, Tamamo spins a roundhouse kick into his gut, sending Narako flying back a dozen paces. Not waiting for him to recover, she spins back onto her feet facing him and holds out her hands. A moment later, blue fire engulfs her hands in a series of rings going all the way up to her elbow. When he notices the fire, Narako's first response is to bark out a laugh before charging at her with his full speed. However, he misses. To her side, 2 paces away, Narako swings at another Tamamonome identical to herself, and his fist goes straight through her body without resistance. The illusory clone disperses around his fist like disturbed smoke and she doesn't give him the chance to express his confusion before a pair of blue rings of fire leave her wrists and slam into him in an explosion of fire. The concussive force sends Narako flying, but the fire doesn't leave him and continues to burn away at his cursed energy. A moment later, his cursed energy swells and drowns out her fire, putting it out. At this point, she kind of expected it, but he really does have a lot more cursed energy than she thought. He barely feels like a grade 3 sorcerer, but no one with such little output would be able to put out her fire so easily, all without showing the slightest bit of exhaustion. "Hey Tamamo," Narako calls out, making her pause. "Asking for mercy?" She asks in return, a mockery that doesn't faze him in the slightest. He grins wildly at her. "Your tail is showing." His words shock her back into focus and her head snaps to the side to look behind her, only to see that her tails are not, in fact, showing. She realizes the trick for what it was only an instant before an incredible impact slams into her gut, knocking the air out of her lungs and launching her across the ground. Narako doesn't let up and she has to roll to avoid him stomping down on her, and as she rolls onto her back she points both arms up at him and releases a point-blank explosion of fire that once more separates them. Coughing to herself as she floods her system with yuki to repair her ruptured organs, Tamamo climbs back to her feet and pats herself down of dirt, glaring at Narako as he does the same. "You tricked me," she accuses, genuinely offended. Tricking people is supposed to be her thing. Tricking people is the pastime of her entire species, and yet this human tricked her and has the gall to grin about it. But more importantly, "How long have you known?" she asks, her voice a whisper. Pretty early on, he answers without a care, still smiling that DMN smile at her. "You are going to want to do a better job avoiding making such a distinction between yourself and us humans if you want to blend in the future. Why didn't you say anything?" She accuses him with a glare. It seemed like you wanted to keep it a secret for some reason, so I didn't ask. Everyone is entitled to their secrets, and you've been too kind for me to pry on yours. You don't seem to have a problem doing so to score a cheap hit, Tamamo grumbles. All is fair in love and war, he responds, sounding like he is quoting something but she doesn't know what. Either way, she can admit that it's a good quote. That doesn't change the core issue here, however. Why would you travel with me if you knew? She asks, getting somewhat frustrated at him acting like he doesn't get it. Does it matter? He asks instead, making her brow twitch. Of course it matters. She yells at him. You are a human and I am a yokai. Our nature opposes one another. Humans are nothing but food and entertainment to yokai, and yokai are nothing but monsters to be killed to humans. I should have deceived and killed you the moment we met. That is my nature. And you should have killed me the moment you found out. You're a sorcerer, aren't you? Breathing strong after her rant, Tamamo glares at Narako as he tilts his head this way and that, visibly thinking over her words. Eventually, however, he just shrugs and grins that same DMN. Smile at her. I don't really care about anything like that. Labels are pretty limiting. Besides, you were literally teaching me about how yokai have their own society just like humans do earlier. If you tried to kill me because you were evil and that was your nature, then I wouldn't blame you, but you didn't, so why does it matter? You're not just a yokai. You are Tamamo no Me, and while Tamamo no Me is indeed a yokai, no other yokai is Tamamo no Me. In the end, I'm a pretty simple guy, you know. I like you, so I'm not going to kill you if I can help it, even if you do wind up being evil and slaughtering my kind. This insufferably single-minded man. Yokai and humans don't get along. They don't make friends and they certainly don't travel together, teaching each other. It's wrong. It's all wrong. But his words. Yokai should despise humans. She should look down on them as the pathetic monkeys that they are. Humans too, should despise yokai. They should look at them with hatred and fear. Not a single human has ever seen her without her disguise and not given that instinctual reaction. It is written into their very being. An order of nature. A yokai exists off of the fear of humans. It is humanity's fear itself that composes their souls, so it is impossible for a human to see a yokai and not give the same reaction. Even trained sorcerers who do not truly fear yokai still flinch. It is an instinctual truth that proves the separation between their species. Glaring at him, she decides actions can prove her point better than words ever could, and she makes his bluff a reality by completely dropping her illusions, revealing her true form. Aesthetically, the change isn't massive. Her hair grows longer, her ears reveal themselves on top of her head. Her eyes slit, fangs sharpen, claws grow and 3 thick tails fan out behind her. She is a kitsune. A yokai. A monster. For all his words, there is simply no way for a human to look upon her without flinching. She closes her eyes, irrationally unwilling to see the judgment in his own. Yet, deep down, she knew his answer. There's only one way he could ever respond. Appealing. The whispered word carries its way to her ears and she feels warm. That's just the kind of man he is. Opening her eyes, she ignores the slight stinging in them as she takes in the sight of Narako, slightly roughed up from their fight but otherwise fresh as his eyes roam her body with his mouth slightly parted. For some reason she refuses to identify, a flush of embarrassment fills her under his intense stare, so she reflectively strikes a subtle pose and winks seductively at him. Kitsune are seductresses after all. Even if it's not something she practices a lot, it is still a comfort zone she can go to hide her feelings in this moment. It's rude to stare, she purrs at him, not hiding her heritage at all, and he really doesn't flinch. His eyes meet her own, and it's actually her that has to hide a flinch as she can feel the pure acceptance in his gaze. Humans are food. Playthings. Savages that will swarm you with fire and blood just for being different. They should be killed. Eaten. Tricked or avoided. That's what the village elders always told her. It's what every yokai she's ever met has told her. Humans and yokai are enemies by BRTH. Coexistence is not possible. Humans will never accept them. There's no point in even trying. Even compared to trickster kitsune, humans cannot be trusted. Kitsune trick and they lie, but when a deal has been made, they do not betray. Oni proudly claim that there is nothing false in the words of Oni. Humans however. They lie and they cheat and they betray. Using dirty, dishonorable tricks to make up for their own weakness. Humans are the enemy. So why? Why are you so different? Ah, my bad. I didn't mean to stare, I just didn't expect your fur to be so appealing, you must take great pride in it, Narako comments, and she forces down a blush because yes, she does take great pride in it. You truly don't care, do you? She asks, still somewhat baffled even if she's coming to accept it. Tamamonome is Tamamonome. Yokai or human doesn't really matter. It's you I like, not your species. When he says things like that she doesn't know if this dense idiot is flirting or not and it's incredibly annoying. You are a truly strange human. Better to be a freak than to be boring, he responds with a shrug before grinning wildly at her once again. So, we were in the middle of something. Laughing lightly, Tamamo feels her own savage grin spread to match his. She's done holding anything back. He is clearly so far beyond anything she would have expected from a human. So for the first time in her life, she is going to give this everything she's got. Her tails fan out and blue fire once more graces her body. A series of concentric rings cover her arms all the way up to her shoulders, where another 2 rings of blue fire hover, above and slightly behind her shoulders. Behind her, 3 rings of matching fire light up at the tips of her tails, not quite touching, and finally, another ring of fire appears above her head like a burning halo. Kami, that looks so cool, Narako practically squeals, his excitement clear and matching with her own. Don't die on me now, Tamamo calls out to him as she blurs into his personal space, a blue ring of fire glowing in her eyes, Narako. Despite her speed having increased significantly, he still manages to lean out of the way, but it doesn't matter as the ring of fire around her wrist doesn't lose any momentum and flies right into his face, exploding into a burst of fire. Narako is launched to the ground but he just reaches an arm out behind him and transitions the fall into a backwards flip, curling his legs in to avoid having them removed by her follow-up. She keeps up her momentum, leaving him on the back foot as he is forced to block, parry and dodge as best as he is able. Which is pretty good, as she only manages to land some grazing blows. Her grin only grows wider as she waits for him to get comfortable with her assault, and then she coats herself in an illusion and has her illusory self drop low for a leg sweep. Narako jumps over the leg as she predicted and she is already in the air ready for him. Spinning for momentum, Tamamo kicks him with everything she's got, but unexpectedly, he is able to bring his arms up in time to block, flaring his cursed energy enough that his arms only snap in half instead of getting removed entirely. Her attack creates enough distance between them that Narako can gather his bearings, and he meets her in the middle once again. Only this time, when she sends an illusion forward and comes at him from the side, he notices. Her clawed hand meets air as he ducks under it and grabs her wrist, ignoring the way his hand burns under her fire, and uses the leverage to pull her off balance, right into his waiting elbow. Her head snaps back from the blow, but her grin only grows as she recognizes the movement he just made. That's my move. She thinks, recognizing the counter as a perfect mirror of her own movements at the start of the fight. Instead of letting him press harder, her tails shoot over her shoulders intent on skewering him, but he uses her gut as a springboard to kick off of and launches backwards. As soon as his feet touch the ground, they are charging right back at each other, and she feels his cursed energy lean to her right, so she leans left, right into Narako's fist. What? She thinks to herself as one of her tails throws its ring of fire like a shuriken at him. I know I read his cursed energy right. He was going right. Narako leans back under the ring of fire, showing some impressive flexibility, and she feels his cursed energy surging in a pattern she knows to mean that he will plant his hands and use them as a spring to kick her in the chest. But when she leans back to avoid it, she finds her knee getting kicked strong enough to buckle, but not snap. As she falls, the rings of fire above her shoulders slam into each other and cause a concentrated explosion that launches Narako back away. In the brief respite, she tries to figure out what is going on, and like a lightning bolt, it comes to her. He's trying to mimic my illusions with just cursed energy. Standing off against him, she notices that his clothes are in tatters, showing off most of his well-muscled upper body, and most importantly, that he is uninjured. Obviously, he has taken damage, but his use of positive energy has healed him. Yet, he doesn't even seem tired despite that. The next moment, her senses blare as she feels a lot of cursed energy gathering around one of his arms until it becomes visible to her and she realizes what he's doing. He's trying to copy her fire now. The idiot doesn't realize that it is literally impossible, but that doesn't mean he can't just launch pure cursed energy at her. Which he does a moment later in a thin beam that tears up the ground behind her when she dodges. Just how much cursed energy does he have? She screams to herself as she charges forward once more, feeling her blood pumping in her veins like it never has before. Is he even human? Illusions cloak her form, but Narako's eyes meet her own regardless, and she can only smile wider, a laugh leaving her lips as she realizes what she's feeling. Danger. She's in danger of losing, for the first time in her life, and against a human at that. Her laugh turns slightly hysterical as they come to clash once more, and she feels her Yuki surging like it never has before, a clarity of mind hitting her like the greatest drag. Sparks of black race off of her fist as it closes in on his chest. Black flash. The words leave her lungs without thought. Space itself bends around her fist as it digs into Narako's diaphragm and explodes with more force than anything she's ever hit before. Blood explodes from his chest and flies out of his mouth as Narako is launched back into the forest and through half a dozen trees before eventually sliding to a stop. A feeling of euphoria floods Tamamo's mind as her Yuki flows to her every whim. It feels to her like her Yuki has been mud this entire time and only now became water, flowing with such ease she wonders how she ever managed to move it before today. Turning delighted eyes upon the forest, she watches Narako pick himself up, a hand over the steadily closing hole she left in his chest. But despite very nearly dying, his smile almost matches her own. No words are needed. This final clash will decide the victor. Narako's cursed energy surges, and for the first time since meeting him, she can feel it. His curse. All restraint disappears and an ocean of cursed energy coats his body. The inefficiency is obvious. The return in reinforcement he is getting for each unit of cursed energy is noticeably diminishing, but what does it matter if he can just keep pouring more, and more, and more energy into his body? Matching him, her own Yuki surges. The rings of fire covering her arms double, and she creates an equal amount covering her legs from thigh to ankle, then she makes even more. Half a dozen tiny rings of fire bursting into being over each of her fingers. She doesn't bother with any illusions and just shoves everything she has into her body and her fire, enhancing herself so much that her back itches, a new tail wanting to spring to life but not quite able to. There is no spoken signal. Some instinct in them just understands. A connection between them forged from travel and combat lets her practically read his mind as they charge one another. No holding back. No defense. No hesitance. Do or die, attack with everything. They meet in the middle. The ground craters. Trees are torn out of the earth and flung into the distance. The very sky cracks and a thunderous boom deafens all the animals unlucky enough to be in the curtain. Wind rages as they are both launched back from the point of impact like a pair of missiles, trails of BLD following in their wake. Pain like she has never felt before fills Tamamo's mind like static as her body is flung through tree after tree until she eventually bounces across the earth and slowly rolls to a stop. For a long moment, she just lies there, unmoving as she waits for the ringing in her ears to stop. Without moving her body, she cracks her eyes open to see a cloud of dust settling around her. She feels numb, but little by little, control of her body comes back to her. Enough that she can tilt her neck and look at herself. Her clothes are in tatters, leaving her rather immodest. Her skin is red and raw, covered in tears and cuts profusely leaking BLD. Moving her eyes to the side slightly, a disbelieving huff leaves her throat and the pain hardly even registers as she takes in the sight. Her arm is gone. Only a roughly torn stump remains of her bicep, flaps of flesh and white bone open to the air as BLD endlessly pools around her. Relaxing herself, her head falls back and she stares up at the sky, feeling too many emotions to really pick any one out. It takes some time for her muddled thoughts to gather around a single, unavoidable point. I lost? Even if Narako is in as bad a spot as she is, not winning is itself an act of loss. He also seems to have better healing options than she does, at least in the short term. What a monster. A wheezing, stilted laugh leaves her and she ignores the pain it causes as warmth fills her with a smile. I lost, she thinks to herself again, and in spite of the pain it causes her, she continues to laugh. She feels joy. Finally, she has found an equal. Someone who can keep up with her. Someone who can understand her. Who accepts her. Who is strong like her. How could she feel anything but joy at that? You're not dead. I'm glad. Her head turns enough to see Narako approach. Leaves, twigs and debris crunches under his bare feet as he limps closer to her, one of his own arm also missing while his other slowly works on repairing all the internal damage done to him. Once he shuffles close enough to her, he plops down on the ground next to her head with a slight grunt and looks down into her eyes with a happy, childlike grin on his face. That was fun, he tells her, and she wants to believe him, to bask in the moment with him. But when she looks into his eyes, she can see the truth. He's not truly satisfied. Once that thought hits her, she can no longer keep ignoring one simple fact. Throughout the entire fight, not once did Narako use his innate technique. Even still, his smile is pure and his joy is genuine. He is happy. He's not lying when he said he had fun. In fact, he hasn't lied to her once. She didn't think he was even capable of lying. So why? You're strong. Would he lie? So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author BoredMc on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.